The wind howled outside like a lost beast. Red dust from the barren planet of Tarsa beat against the metal walls of a lonely home at the edge of the colony. Inside that home lived Ethan Cross, a middle-aged human engineer who had long forgotten the sound of laughter. He worked, ate, and slept in silence. The hum of his machines was his only company. Sometimes he talked to the walls just to hear his own voice. No one ever came this far. No one wanted to. But that night was different. It was near midnight when he heard a knock on his metal door, loud and desperate. Ethan froze. For years, no one had ever come here uninvited. He slowly grabbed his plasma wrench and walked to the door. Another knock, harder this time. And then a voice, rough and slurred. "Open up, human, I need help." Ethan unlocked the door with a hiss. Outside stood a drunk alien man, his skin pale blue and his eyes unfocused. His clothes were torn and his breath smelled of cheap liquor. Behind him stood a young girl, her small hands clutching a worn bag. The man wobbled and bowed clumsily. "You are Ethan Cross, yes? The one who fixed my ship long ago?" Ethan frowned. "I don't remember." "You saved my life," the alien said, his voice cracking. "I owe you. I cannot pay, but take my daughter. She can clean, cook. She is quiet. Please." Ethan looked at the girl. She couldn't be more than 16. Her hair was silver white, her eyes deep blue like still water. But there was something strange. She didn't look up, didn't react, didn't even blink at the sound of their voices. "She can't hear you," the man said sadly. "She's deaf. Born that way. But she's a good worker, please." "I have no choice," Ethan crossed his arms. "I don't need anyone." The alien fell to his knees. "Please, if I keep her, she will die in the mines. I drink too much. I can't protect her." His voice broke. "Let her stay here, just for a while." The girl looked at Ethan then, her face calm, her eyes shining faintly in the dim light. She pressed her hand to her chest and bowed slightly, a silent thank you, though he hadn't agreed yet. Ethan sighed. He hated company, but something about the way she stood there, small, silent, and calm in the storm, made his heart soften. "Fine," he said at last. "Just for a week." The alien wept with relief, thanked him over and over, and stumbled away into the darkness. Ethan closed the door and turned to face the girl. She smiled faintly and began to unpack her small bag. Inside were only a few clothes and an old metal locket. She moved around the room quietly, cleaning without being asked, as if she knew what needed to be done. For the first time in years, Ethan heard footsteps that were not his own. Days passed. The girl, her name was Lyra, never spoke, but she wrote on a small pad she carried. Her handwriting was soft and neat. She asked simple things. "Where do I put this?" Or "Do you want food?" Ethan answered with short words, sometimes nodding, sometimes grunting. Yet he began to notice something odd. When Lyra touched the old machines in his workshop, they started working better. Old circuits that had failed for months suddenly came alive. His power core, once unstable, began to hum smoothly again. One evening he caught her standing near the reactor wall, her hand pressed gently against the metal. Her eyes glowed faint blue and the air around her shimmered slightly. Ethan blinked and it was gone. He called out, "What are you doing?" She didn't hear, of course, but she turned, smiled faintly, and held up a note. "Just listening." Listening? To what, the machines? The silence? That night, as Ethan lay awake, he thought about her strange word. Listening. How could she listen when she was deaf? Outside, lightning danced in the distance. Inside, his machines hummed a strange melody he had never noticed before. The next morning, the colony grid, which had been failing for months, was suddenly fully powered. No explanation. The communication tower blinked alive. Ethan's home systems ran smoother than ever. People in the colony said it was a miracle. Ethan knew better. It had started the moment Lyra arrived. He looked at her as she swept the floor silently, sunlight catching her silver hair. She looked peaceful, but something about her calm eyes made him uneasy. He began to wonder who she really was. That night, while he repaired an old droid, he heard faint movement. Lyra was in the workshop again, standing by the reactor, her fingers touching the glowing core. The hum of the machine rose, almost like it was breathing. Ethan whispered, "What are you?" She turned, met his eyes, and smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. and in that moment every light in the room flickered bright white, then went out. The house was silent again, but this time the silence felt alive. The night after the blackout, the small house on Tarsa stood in total darkness. The air smelled of metal and dust. Ethan sat beside the broken generator, a single lantern glowing beside him. Across the room, Lyra slept quietly on the floor, her silver hair shining faintly even without light. Ethan had tried to fix the power for hours, but nothing worked. The strange thing was, none of the circuits were burnt. It was as if the power had simply gone away, like it didn't want to flow anymore. He rubbed his tired eyes and stared at Lyra. She looked peaceful, like she didn't belong in this harsh world. How could someone like her survive here? He thought about what he saw, the glowing eyes, the strange shimmer in the air when she touched the reactor. He whispered to himself, "You're not just a deaf girl, are you?" The lantern flickered. For a moment he thought he saw her lips move in her sleep, as if she heard him. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of humming. Not a machine's hum, but a soft, almost musical vibration in the walls. He rushed to the workshop and stopped. Lyra stood in front of the generator, her hands resting gently on the metal shell. Blue light flowed around her fingers, crawling over the machine like living threads. The generator came alive with a deep, smooth pulse. Every light in the room flickered back on, stronger than before. Ethan stared in shock. "Lyra," he shouted. She turned, startled, and pulled her hands away. The glow faded. She looked down, avoiding his eyes. He stepped closer. "What did you just do?" She took out her notepad and wrote quickly. It was noisy. "I made it quiet again," Ethan frowned. "Noisy? It wasn't even running." She smiled faintly and pointed at her head, then at the generator. He didn't understand, but he didn't press further. When he checked the colony grid later that day, he saw something unbelievable. The whole sector's power had stabilized. Systems that had failed for months now ran perfectly. Even the central beacon, used to contact orbiting ships, was back online. The engineers in the colony couldn't explain it. Ethan knew it was no coincidence. That night, Ethan found Lyra sitting by the window watching the stars. She wrote something on her pad and showed it to him. "Do you fix things because you are lonely?" The question hit him like a punch. He sat beside her and sighed. "Maybe. Machines don't talk back." "They don't lie." She nodded, then wrote again. "They talk. You just don't hear it." He stared at her, confused. "You mean, you can hear them?" She smiled softly, her blue eyes glowing in the dim light. Then she took his hand and placed it on the wall. The metal was warm and vibrating faintly. "You feel that?" she mouthed. Ethan nodded. She wrote, "That is their voice. Machines sing when they are happy, cry when they are broken. I listen." For a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. The way she wrote it, the calm certainty, the peaceful tone. It was as if she truly lived in another kind of world. The next few days felt strange. Lyra helped around the house as usual, but sometimes Ethan would find her standing perfectly still, listening to things no one else could hear. The pulse of the power lines, the buzz of the drones, the deep hum of the planet's core, and each time she touched something, it worked better afterward. Ethan started to feel something unusual in his heart, trust. He hadn't felt that in years, but it grew stronger every day she stayed. Then one evening, as they ate in silence, a low rumble filled the sky. Ethan looked out the window. A massive black ship descended over the colony, its lights red and cold. It was marked with the emblem of the Tarsan Authority, the government that ruled the colonies. His comm screen flashed with a warning. "Attention all residents. We are searching for a fugitive experimental subject known as Project Echo. If you see a young female with abnormal energy resonance, report immediately." Ethan turned toward Lyra. She froze, her spoon dropping from her hand. Her face turned pale. He whispered, "Lyra, what's Project Echo?" Her fingers shook as she wrote on her pad. The words were slow, uneven. "It's me." Ethan stared at the pad, then at her trembling hands. The air in the room grew heavy. Outside, the red lights from the patrols swept across the dusty plains. He whispered, "They're looking for you?" Lyra nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Ethan clenched his fists. The quiet girl who fixed his machines, who made his lonely world alive again, was being hunted. He looked at the dark sky, the red light flashing across his home. For the first time in years, Ethan Cross felt fear, but also something stronger. He was not going to give her up. The red lights from the patrol ship painted the sky above Tarsa like fire. Dust swirled across the plains as search drones scanned every hut, every shadow. Ethan turned off all lights and pulled Lyra into the workshop. Her hands trembled. The soft hum that usually surrounded her was gone. She was completely still, almost like the machines had stopped breathing too. Ethan whispered, "They're looking for you." "Why, what did you do?" Lyra shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. She took her notepad and wrote with shaky hands. "I didn't do anything. They made me." Ethan frowned. "Made you? What does that mean?" She wrote again. "Project Echo, I was born in a lab. They said I could hear what no one else could." He leaned closer. "Hear what?" She paused, then pressed her hand against the metal wall. The faint hum returned. When she looked up, her eyes glowed soft blue again. "Machines. Signals. Frequencies," she wrote. "I can hear what they feel. I can tell them what to do." Ethan's throat went dry. "You control machines. With your mind?" She hesitated, then nodded. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. Searchlights swept past the window. Ethan whispered, "Why are they hunting you?" She wrote slowly. "They wanted soldiers like me. Living weapons. I ran away before they could use me." The meaning sank in like a weight. The quiet girl who had fixed his lonely machines wasn't just gifted. She was created. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something twist in his chest. She wasn't dangerous. She was frightened, fragile, human in every way that mattered. He said softly, "You're safe here. I won't let them take you." Lyra looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. She touched her chest, then his heart. A silent thank you. Outside, the air cracked with the sound of thunder, not from a storm, but from landing troops. Ethan moved quickly. "We need to hide." He opened the hidden panel beneath the reactor floor, a small maintenance crawlspace he used for wiring. Lyra crawled inside silently. Ethan closed the panel just as 3 soldiers banged on the front door. "Open up. This is Tarsan Authority Security." Ethan wiped sweat from his face and unlocked the door slowly. 3 armored figures stood in the red glow, their helmets reflecting the flicker of the storm. One of them scanned him with a wrist device. "You're Ethan Cross?" "Yes," Ethan replied, forcing calm into his voice. "We're looking for a runaway female. Age about 16, pale skin, blue eyes, silver hair. Seen anyone like that?" Ethan shook his head. "No one comes here. I work alone." The soldier narrowed his eyes. "You sure about that?" "Our scanners picked up strange readings from this location." "Probably my machines," Ethan said, trying to sound annoyed. "You people always think everything's a fugitive." The soldier stepped past him, glancing around. Another moved toward the workshop. Ethan's heart pounded. He stood still, his mind racing. Then, a faint hum, the same soft vibration Lyra always made when she felt nervous. The scanner in the soldier's hand beeped sharply. "Sir, I've got something." Ethan's heart stopped. The officer walked toward the workshop. "Where's your reactor?" Ethan swallowed. "Downstairs." "Be careful, it's unstable." He stepped in front of the soldier, blocking the path. "You walk too close, it could overload." The soldier frowned. "Move aside." Ethan forced a shaky laugh. "Go ahead. But if this place blows, your report will be very short." The officer hesitated. The machine beeped again, then suddenly went silent. Inside the crawl space, Lyra's eyes glowed faintly. Her hands moved slowly in the dark, touching the metal. The machine's signal died like a candle in the wind. After a few tense seconds, the officer shrugged. "False alarm. Let's move to the next sector." They left without another word. The door closed and Ethan's knees almost gave out. He waited a full minute before opening the panel. Lyra crawled out, pale and shaking. He hugged her without thinking. She stiffened at first, then relaxed in his arms. Ethan whispered, "You saved us." She smiled weakly, wrote one word on her pad. "Sorry." "Sorry for what?" She looked at him sadly. "You shouldn't have to protect me." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not protecting you because I have to. I'm protecting you because you make me feel alive again." Lyra looked down, her eyes full of emotion she couldn't speak. The hum of the machines around them grew soft and warm like a heartbeat. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone in his silence, but far above the colony, on the dark ship orbiting Tarsa, a voice echoed through static. "Subject Echo's signal has gone dark. That means she's still alive. A cold smile spread across the commander's face. Track the human who hides her. Ethan Cross. The hunt had only just begun. The morning after the soldiers left, the sky above Tarsa burned orange. Dust storms rolled across the desert like angry waves. Ethan stood at the edge of his small dome home, staring at the horizon where the red sun was rising. He hadn't slept all night. Every time the wind howled, he imagined boots crunching on metal, scanners beeping, soldiers breaking through his door. Behind him, Lyra was packing quietly. She folded her few clothes, her notepad, and that small silver locket she always kept near her heart. She looked calm, but her hands trembled. Ethan turned. "You think they'll come back?" Lyra nodded slowly. She wrote on her pad, "They always come back. They don't stop until they get what they want." He read the words and clenched his jaw. "Then we can't stay here." Lyra blinked in surprise. "Go where?" She wrote. "North," he said, pointing out the window. "There's an old observatory in the mountains." "It's off the grid. I worked there years ago before the mines took over. If we get there, we can hide." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. They left before sunrise. Ethan loaded supplies into his old rover, an ancient six-wheeled vehicle that coughed and rattled but still moved. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes scanning the sky. As they drove across the endless desert, the colony grew smaller behind them until it disappeared into the dust. For hours, they said nothing. The rover groaned over rocks and sand, leaving long trails behind. The storm winds rose again, turning the world into a blur of red and gold. At one point, Ethan glanced at Lyra. She was holding her locket, her lips moving slightly, though no sound came. He asked, "Is that your mother's?" She opened the locket and showed him a small holographic photo of a woman with silver hair and warm eyes. Under it, faint text glowed. "Lyra, version 2. Ethan frowned. "Version 2? She looked away, closing the locket. Her hands shook as she wrote, "The first one didn't survive. I was the second attempt." He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. The storm outside spoke for them, its roaring wind filling the silence between their hearts. By evening, they reached a canyon. Ethan parked the rover under an overhang. The wind screamed above, but down here it was quiet. He checked the map. "We're halfway there," he said. "We'll rest tonight." Lyra nodded and began unpacking the supplies. She moved slower than usual. Sweat rolled down her pale face. Ethan frowned. "You okay?" She nodded again, but her hands trembled as she poured water into a cup. The metal can rattled, and then her eyes rolled back. "Lyra!" Ethan caught her before she fell. Her body was hot to the touch, glowing faintly under her skin. Her pulse fluttered weakly like a dying spark. He laid her down gently. "Stay with me," he whispered. She opened her eyes and mouthed, "Too much noise." "What noise?" he asked. She pointed weakly at the sky. "They're searching." Ethan realized it. Her power reacted to signals. The soldiers must be scanning the entire region, and her body was hearing every signal like a scream. He cursed under his breath and opened the rover's panel. "Hold on." Using his old tools, he rerouted the comm system, creating a false echo signal, something the trackers could follow away from them. A few minutes later, distant lights appeared in the far sky, drones moving in the opposite direction. Fooled by his decoy, Lyra's breathing slowed. The glow under her skin faded. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You rest. I've got you." She opened her notepad with weak hands and wrote, "Why help me, Ethan? You don't even know who I am." He smiled softly. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to be alone." Her eyes softened. She reached out, touching his chest gently. For a moment, her hand glowed faintly against his heart, as if she could hear the rhythm of his life. By dawn, they reached the mountains. The old observatory stood tall against the sky, half buried in sand, windows shattered, but still holding its proud shape. Ethan parked the rover near the main door and helped Lyra inside. Dust floated in the golden light, and the air smelled of old metal and memories. "This used to be my home," Ethan said quietly. "I studied the stars here before." He stopped himself. Lyra tilted her head, waiting. He sighed. "Before I lost my family," she wrote softly. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "My daughter's name was Lyra, too." Her eyes widened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It felt like fate had brought two lost souls with the same name together. Ethan smiled sadly. Maybe the universe is giving me a second chance. Lyra looked at him with tears in her eyes and mouthed, "Thank you." That night, the storm outside raged louder than ever. Ethan secured the doors while Lyra sat by the broken telescope, gazing at the stars that peeked through the dust. In the distance, unseen to them, a black ship hovered high above the planet. Its scanners locked onto the faint energy trail of the rover. "Target located," said a cold voice. "They're in the northern observatory. The hunt wasn't over. It was only moving closer." The observatory on the mountain stood silent beneath the red sky. Its glass dome was cracked, its halls filled with sand and broken wires, yet somehow it still felt alive, like the ghosts of old stars were whispering inside the walls. Ethan walked slowly through the dusty corridors, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Lyra followed behind him, her small steps careful and quiet. Every time her hand brushed the wall, the faint blue glow returned to her fingertips, like the metal remembered her touch. He led her into the main control room. The old monitors were half dead, their screens flickering with weak static. In the center of the room stood a large data core, covered in dust but still humming faintly. Ethan brushed the control panel. "This used to be my world," he said quietly. "I studied star patterns here. I believed in the beauty of silence between the stars." Lyra looked around, her eyes soft. She took out her notepad and wrote, "The stars talk too. You just don't know how to listen." He smiled faintly. "You really think everything has a voice, don't you?" She nodded and touched the old console. The hum grew louder. The screens flickered, and then one of them came alive. Lines of code rolled across the display. Ethan froze. "That's not supposed to happen." Lyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes scanning the screen. Her fingers moved gently across the panel as if tracing invisible music. The static shifted into sound, deep, pulsing tones that filled the room like a heartbeat. Ethan backed away slightly. "Lyra, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. Her lips moved silently and the machines responded like loyal pets. Then suddenly a projection burst from the main console, a swirling blue sphere filled with data. In the middle of the sphere appeared a symbol, a broken circle around a human ear. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that mark. He had seen it years ago on secret blueprints hidden deep in the Authority archives. "Project Echo," he whispered. Lyra turned to him, her eyes sad. He pointed at the symbol. "That's you, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. Then she wrote on her pad, "They called it the Machine God Project." Ethan frowned. "Machine God?" Lyra sat down beside the console, her small hand still glowing. She wrote again, slower this time. "They wanted to make people who could talk to all machines at once. To control cities, armies, even planets. But it failed. Everyone died." She hesitated, then wrote the last line with shaking fingers. "Except me." Ethan sank into a chair. "So you're the last of them?" She nodded. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through their bones. The projection shifted again, now showing blueprints of human bodies filled with circuits, veins glowing like wires. Lyra reached out, touched the image of herself. "They said I was too quiet," she mouthed. "Too human." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Being human isn't a failure, Lyra. It's what saved you." For the first time she smiled. Not the faint, polite smile she always gave, but something real and warm. It lasted only a moment before her expression turned fearful. The observatory lights flickered red. An alarm beeped softly from the main screen. Ethan looked up. "What's happening?" Lyra typed rapidly on the pad. "They found us. I can feel their signal." Through the broken dome above, distant lights glowed in the sky, dark ships cutting through the clouds, heading straight toward the mountain. Ethan cursed under his breath. "We need to shut everything down now." He grabbed tools, running to the reactor core. "If we kill the signal before they lock on, maybe they'll lose our trail." Lyra followed, her steps weak but determined. The machines responded to her presence like nervous animals sensing danger. Ethan opened the main control conduit. "I can overload the system manually," he muttered. "It'll fry the grid and maybe fry me with it." Lyra's eyes widened. She grabbed his arm, shaking her head violently. He looked at her. "If they find you, they'll take you back. You'll be their prisoner again," she wrote quickly. "If you die, I'll die too. We are connected now." Ethan didn't understand at first. Then he remembered. The hum that followed her, the way machines moved when she breathed, the strange pulse in the air whenever she smiled. Her energy had merged with his home systems, and now this observatory too. She was part of it. He took a deep breath. Then we'll find another way. Lyra closed her eyes, listening to the noise in the air. The faint blue glow around her hands brightened until the whole room shimmered. She looked back at him and mouthed one word: trust. Then she pressed her palms to the reactor. The lights exploded into white. Ethan stumbled back, shielding his face. Every screen lit up with her voice, a silent song of energy, as if the machines were singing with her. Then the power cut out. Silence fell again, deep and heavy. Ethan opened his eyes. Lyra stood in the dark, breathing hard, her glow fading. "They can't find us now," she mouthed weakly. He caught her as she fell into his arms. Her body was cold, her pulse faint. Outside, the warships slowed, their scanners blind. The mountain was just another rock to them now. Inside, Ethan held the girl who had silenced a world and whispered, "You're more than a machine, Lyra. You're a miracle." The silence after the overload was heavy, almost sacred. The observatory stood in darkness, its machines still humming faintly like a giant heart catching its breath. Ethan sat beside Lyra, who lay pale and weak on the cold floor. Outside, the storm had begun again, red dust spinning in wild circles under the flashing skies. The wind screamed across the rocks, but inside everything was still. Ethan pressed a damp cloth to Lyra's forehead. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, faintly glowing blue in the dim light. She reached for her notepad with trembling fingers and wrote, "They can't find us anymore." He smiled sadly. "Yeah, but you burned yourself out." Lyra's lips moved slowly. "It's worth it," he sighed, brushing the dust from her hair. "You always think saving everyone else is worth dying for." She smiled faintly. "So do you." Ethan froze for a moment, then laughed softly. "Guess you're right." Hours passed. The observatory creaked in the wind. Ethan worked on repairing the systems using spare parts while Lyra rested near the core. But something strange began to happen. The machines were no longer silent. They whispered. Faint beeps, tiny pulses, electric murmurs, all rising and falling like they were breathing. And every time Lyra stirred in her sleep, the rhythm changed to match her heartbeat. Ethan stopped working and listened. The sound wasn't random. It was music. He turned to her and whispered, "You're dreaming, and they're listening." Then, without warning, the entire building trembled. Ethan ran to the window. Through the storm's red haze, he saw lights cutting across the sky. The authorities' ships. They had found them again. "Impossible," he muttered. She cut the signal. But the ships didn't need signals anymore. They had learned her rhythm. They were following her frequency. Ethan rushed back to her side. "Lyra, wake up!" Her eyes opened slowly. She could already feel it, the deep shaking vibration in the air. She mouthed one word. "They're here." The ground shook as the first blast hit the mountainside. Rocks shattered and rolled down the slope. The observatory groaned as its dome cracked further. Ethan grabbed her hand. "We have to go." But Lyra didn't move. She stood up slowly, her small body glowing again, brighter this time. The machines around them started humming louder, responding to her presence. "Lyra, stop. You'll kill yourself," Ethan shouted. She shook her head and wrote one last message on her pad. "I can't hide anymore. I have to make them stop hearing me." Before he could stop her, she walked to the center of the room and placed her hands on the reactor. The blue glow spread through her arms, then into the walls, then through the entire building. The hum turned into a deep, shaking tone, a sound without sound, so powerful it vibrated through the floor and the air. Outside, the sky darkened. Lightning crackled across the clouds, forming strange patterns, circles of energy spiraling outward. The storm twisted into something unnatural. Ethan ran to her, shouting over the rising noise. "Lyra, what are you doing?" She turned to him with glowing eyes, her voice silent but clear in his mind, ending the noise. Then everything exploded into light. From the ships above, the soldiers watched in horror as the entire mountain lit up like a dying star. Their scanners screamed with static, their engines froze, their controls locked. One by one, the ships lost power and began to fall from the sky, swallowed by the storm below. Inside the observatory, Ethan fell to his knees as the air shimmered around him. Lyra stood in the center of the chaos, her hair flowing like silver fire, her body surrounded by a halo of blue energy. She wasn't human anymore, she was resonance itself. The machines, the rocks, even the storm, all obeyed her silent command. The dust turned to light, the wind slowed, and the collapsing dome froze mid-air as if held by invisible hands. Ethan watched in awe and fear. "Lyra, you'll burn yourself out!" Her voice echoed inside his mind again, calm and soft. "It's all right. The machines are awake now. They'll take care of you." The last thing he saw was her eyes, bright, pure, and full of peace as the light swallowed everything. When Ethan opened his eyes, the storm was gone. The sky was clear for the first time in years. The observatory still stood, but half of it was melted glass and twisted metal. He stumbled to his feet, coughing. "Lyra?" No answer. He searched the room, his heart pounding, but she was nowhere. The floor where she had stood was now a glowing circle of blue crystal, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. He touched it. The crystal was warm, and in his mind. A familiar voice whispered softly, "I'm still here." Ethan closed his eyes. The hum returned, gentle, steady, alive. The machines were singing again. Outside, the fallen ships lay scattered across the desert. The storm had ended. The air was clear. Ethan looked at the rising sun and smiled through his tears. "She fixed the stars," he whispered, "even if it cost her everything." The wind carried his words softly across the quiet land, and somewhere deep inside the mountain, Lyra's song continued to play, keeping the world alive. The sun rose over Tarsa, painting the sand in shades of gold. For the first time in years, the sky was clear. No dust storms, no red clouds, just peace. Ethan stood at the broken entrance of the observatory, his body weak, his clothes torn, but his eyes alive. The silence around him was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full, soft, calm, breathing. He looked at the ground where the crystal still glowed faintly. The spot where Lyra had stood before the storm took her. The blue light pulsed slowly, steady like a heartbeat. He knelt beside it and whispered, "I know you're still here." The wind moved gently through the open dome, carrying a faint hum that sounded almost like a voice. "I'm here." Ethan closed his eyes, tears filling them. "You did it, Lyra. You saved us." The days that followed were quiet but full of change. The storm clouds had vanished. The colony below reported clear weather for the first time in decades. Machines that had been broken for years began to work again on their own. Power flowed through the lines like a living river. People called it a miracle. They said the planet had healed itself, but Ethan knew the truth. It wasn't the planet. It was her. Lyra had become something more, her energy spreading through every circuit, every drone, every machine on Tarsa. Wherever there was metal or signal, her hum could be felt, a soft, guiding presence that kept everything in harmony. And sometimes, when he fixed an old terminal or touched a control pad, he could still feel her pulse under his skin. "Here, Ethan. I'm helping." He smiled every time he heard it. Months passed. Ethan rebuilt the observatory piece by piece. He cleaned the halls, repaired the panels, and set up new equipment. It wasn't just a home anymore, it was a sanctuary. He placed a small plaque near the reactor where the crystal still glowed. It read, "Lyra, the girl who heard the stars." Every night he sat near that glowing light, talking to her like she was still sitting beside him. He told her about the colony, about how the people were rebuilding, about how machines no longer failed. And though she never spoke out loud, the hum in the walls always answered softly like she was listening. One evening, while watching the sunset through the broken glass dome, he felt a vibration under his chair. The console beside him flickered to life, glowing with a gentle blue light. A message appeared on the screen. "Ethan, are you lonely again?" He chuckled. "You always know, don't you?" Another line appeared. "You talk less now." He smiled. "I guess I ran out of things to say." "Then listen." Ethan leaned back. The observatory filled with a soft resonance. Machines, wind, and the faint rhythm of his own heartbeat blending together. It sounded like a lullaby from another world. He closed his eyes. "It's beautiful." "It's you," the voice whispered inside his mind. "You taught me what silence means." Tears ran down his face. "I thought I taught you how to survive. You did, the hum replied gently. And you taught me love. Years later, Tarsa changed. The colony grew larger. The storms never returned. Ships came and went safely. Engineers called the phenomenon the Lyra effect, a strange, self-balancing energy that kept the planet stable. Most called it science. Some called it magic. Ethan just called it her. He became an old man living among his machines, yet he was never alone. Every console, every drone, every flicker of light whispered her song. Sometimes he would talk to her out loud. You know, you'd have hated this fame, he'd say with a smile. Everyone talking about Project Echo, about how you saved Tarsa. You'd probably just laugh. And the lights around him would flicker gently in agreement. One quiet night, Ethan sat in his chair near the crystal. The stars above shimmered brighter than ever. His breathing was slow, his hands still stained with oil from a day of repairs. He looked up and whispered, "I'm tired. Lyra." The machines around him began to hum softly, her voice wrapping around him like warm air. "It's okay, Ethan. Rest. You've listened long enough." He smiled faintly, eyes closing. "Promise me. You'll keep them safe. Always." The hum grew softer, slower, until it matched the rhythm of his fading heartbeat. Then for the first time, the silence returned, gentle and kind. The next morning, the engineers found him in his chair, peaceful, with a faint smile on his face. The lights in the observatory pulsed once, bright, blue, alive, and far above, in orbit, every satellite, drone, and ship heard a faint signal whisper through the static. "He's with me now." For one brief moment, the machines across Tarsa sang together, a song made of silence, love and stars, and in that eternal quiet, the lonely human and the deaf girl were never alone again.